Grace Anderson had always thought she understood pain, but nothing prepared her for the unbearable weight of losing Emily, her daughter, the one bright light in her world. It happened on an ordinary afternoon, just like any other. Emily had begged to visit the new animal shelter downtown. Grace had promised they would go that weekend, but fate had its own plans. In the blink of an eye, Emily's life was stolen, not by sickness or age, but by an unexpected tragedy, a reckless driver, an innocent child chasing a stray dog, and a world that would never be the same again. The hospital corridors were too quiet when Grace arrived, clutching Emily's backpack, paw prints painted on the fabric as if the universe were mocking her shattered heart. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Anderson," the doctor had said. His voice was hollow, words too empty to fill the space left by her child. The days that followed blurred. Funeral preparations, divorce papers, grief. It all consumed her. The streets of Millbrook whispered her name with pity, neighbors gossiping in hushed tones about the woman who once had it all and now wandered aimlessly in the park. But for Grace, the pain didn't fade. It settled in, like a dark cloud she couldn't escape. It was on one of those long, lonely walks that Grace first witnessed something that would forever alter her course, an extraordinary bond between a police officer and his canine. There they were, moving in sync, the handler's every movement mirrored by the dog. It wasn't just training, it was understanding. Trust. Something deep in Grace stirred. For the first time since Emily's death, she felt a flicker of hope. She could do this. She could make a difference. And perhaps, in the process, she would heal. She applied to the police academy the next day. Grace poured herself into the rigorous training, her grief slowly transforming into a fierce determination to help others, to never again let a child's life slip through her fingers. But deep down, she knew her journey wasn't just about protecting others. It was about redemption. For herself. For Emily. But the real test was still ahead. Welcome to HeartForce, where you and I find more meaning in life through stories about dogs. Before we continue, please comment below and let us know where you are listening to this video from. And if you have any stories about your dog, feel free to share them with everyone. Grace's first days at the police academy were more grueling than she ever imagined. Every inch of her was pushed beyond its limits. Her physical endurance faltered, but her determination never wavered. The memories of Emily's laugh, the way she would beg Grace to rescue every stray dog they met, pushed her forward. Grace was no longer the woman who had once been lost in the quiet sorrow of her home. She was becoming someone else, stronger, sharper, and driven by a new purpose. Yet, despite the intense focus on her training, Grace couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. She wasn't just doing this for herself. She needed a partner. The kind of partner she had witnessed on that first day in the field. The kind that could be more than just a working dog, but a companion who understood without words. The K9 unit was a place where she could truly prove herself. She wasn't just another recruit. She was someone who knew loss all too well. And that, she believed, made her different. Better. She could understand what it meant to lose everything and yet still have the will to fight back. The day she met Chance changed everything. It wasn't the way Grace had imagined it would happen. Though, she'd expected to meet a dog, a polished, well-trained German Shepherd or Belgian Malinois. Instead, she found Chance, a dog broken in every sense of the word. Abandoned on the streets with matted fur and haunting eyes. His body was frail, and his spirit seemed to have been crushed by a brutal past. Chance wasn't a dog who fit the traditional mold. His scars, both physical and emotional, told the story of a life he hadn't chosen. He had once been trained by Marcus Wells, a canine trainer whose methods were as harsh as they were effective. But Chance hadn't been perfect. His natural compassion had been deemed a weakness, and so he was discarded. Left to die, Grace couldn't ignore the spark in his eyes. She saw something in him that others didn't, something Emily would have seen. He wasn't just a dog. He was a story of redemption. Grace couldn't let him go. "You're not alone anymore," she whispered, crouching down beside him as she wrapped her jacket around his trembling body. "I'm going to help you, Chance." Together, we're going to prove them wrong. The decision to bring Chance into her life wasn't an easy one. It wasn't just about rescuing a dog. It was about giving both of them a second chance. A chance to heal. A chance to find the strength to face a world that had once abandoned them. As Grace stood up, her eyes locked with Chance's. There was no turning back now. The days after bringing Chance home were a whirlwind of adjustments. Grace could see that Chance was more than just a stray. He was a dog with a purpose, and she was determined to help him find it. It wasn't just about training. It was about rebuilding trust. Grace could relate to that feeling all too well. After losing Emily, she had built walls around her heart, walls that Chance, in his own quiet way, seemed to understand. But not everyone shared Grace's faith in Chance. Chief Michael Thompson, a veteran of the police force, was skeptical. Grace had applied to join the K-9 unit with every ounce of her being, but now, with a dog who was considered a failure, her dream was starting to feel more like a long shot. "You want to take this?" "Stop!" Thompson's voice was low and rough, his eyes scanning the paperwork in front of him. "Grace, you're talking about a dog that was abandoned. A dog who wasn't good enough for Marcus Wells Academy. You know the risk you're taking, don't you?" But Grace wasn't going to back down. She had seen something in Chance that no one else had. Chance is not a failure. He's different. His past doesn't define his future. His past will define this department's reputation. Thompson replied coldly. "This is a professional unit, Anderson, not some charity program for failed dogs." But Grace wasn't deterred. She remembered what Sarah had said when she first entered training. Sometimes, the best healers were the ones who had suffered the most. She believed that, and Chance needed someone to believe in him just as much as she needed him to believe in her. Over the next few weeks, Grace threw herself into Chance's training with all the determination she had. It was challenging, especially when the dog's past resurfaced in moments of fear or hesitation. Sometimes, when she would raise her voice to correct him, Chance would cower, reminded of the brutal training he had endured under Wells. It broke Grace's heart, but she refused to let him retreat into himself. "Chance, we're a team," she would tell him, her voice calm but firm. "I'm not going to hurt you. I'm here to help you, just like you're here to help me." Each day, Chance's confidence grew, but so did Grace's. She had started this journey to heal, but what she didn't expect was for Chance to heal her in return. As their bond deepened, so did her resolve to prove that the strength in their partnership wasn't just in their training. It was in their shared story of overcoming. When the call came in about the missing child in Millbrook State Park, Grace knew this was the moment they had been waiting for. It wasn't just another test. It was their first real chance to show what they were capable of together. The radio crackled with the frantic voice of a dispatcher. "We have a 7-year-old boy, Ben Wilson, missing for over 4 hours. He's somewhere in the park, and the temperature's dropping fast. We need all available units." Grace didn't need to hear more. "Chance, we're going in," she said, her voice steady. As they arrived at the park, Grace's heart raced with fear and hope. Ben's parents were there, their faces pale and drawn with terror. Lieutenant Hayes, ever the skeptic, stood by the command post, his expression darkening as he saw Grace and Chance approach. "I'm telling you, Anderson, we need real K-9 support," he muttered under his breath. But Grace only nodded. "Chance is ready." She didn't wait for permission. With Chance by her side, they ventured into the wilderness, the temperature plummeting with every passing minute. Grace knew they were running out of time. Chance's nose worked furiously, his body tensing as he picked up the faintest scent of Ben's backpack. Grace's heart soared as she realized they had found the trail. This wasn't just training anymore, it was real. It was life or death. Every step was agonizing. The trees seemed to close in, the forest becoming more treacherous with each passing minute. But Chance didn't falter. His instincts, once considered weaknesses by those who had abandoned him, now led them forward. 2 hours passed, then 3. But Grace never gave up, and neither did Chance. Finally, the dog stopped suddenly, his body rigid, ears up, his tail held high. He whined softly, then surged forward. Grace followed without question, her heart pounding. Through the trees, they spotted a small figure, Ben, huddled under a fallen log, shivering and scared. "Ben," Grace called softly, her voice full of relief and hope. "We've got you." Ben's eyes opened, wide with fear. But when he saw Chance, the fear melted away. The dog pressed gently against him, offering warmth and comfort. "You're safe now," Grace reassured him, wrapping him in a blanket. But it was Chance who had made the difference. The boy clung to him as though his life depended on it. When they arrived at the command post, Ben's parents broke down in tears, hugging Grace and Chance. "Thank you," they sobbed. "You saved our boy." Lieutenant Hayes stood in silence, watching as Chance remained calm amidst the chaos. For the first time, his eyes softened with respect. "Good work, Anderson," he said quietly, a tone of admiration in his voice. This wasn't just a rescue. It was proof. Proof that Grace had made the right choice. Proof that Chance was everything he had always needed to be. More than a dog. More than a partner. He was a hero. The rescue of Ben Wilson brought Grace and Chance a surge of respect that neither had ever expected. News outlets began to take notice of the unusual K-9 team. And while some applauded Grace's unconventional methods, others were quick to question the decision to bring in a rescue dog. The criticism didn't faze Grace, not anymore. But the scrutiny, especially from Lieutenant Hayes, began to grow. He had been quiet since Ben's rescue, but Grace could sense his doubts. His skepticism hadn't been erased so easily. Despite the success, Grace couldn't shake the feeling that the real test was still ahead. Chance was finally being recognized for his abilities, but the battle for acceptance was far from over. And now, with a looming K-9 certification event, the stakes were higher than ever. Chance had proven himself in real-life situations, but this was different. This was a formal test, a public declaration of his worth. He would have to perform under the watchful eyes of every officer, every expert, every critic who had ever doubted him. Grace didn't hesitate to trust him. Not for a second. The competition was brutal. Dogs from all over the country were there, each one handpicked for their impeccable training. Grace had watched them all, noting their precision and obedience. But she had learned something vital from Chance. It wasn't just about performing a series of tasks. It was about judgment, the ability to assess a situation, to think. The first event was a scent detection trial, a grueling test of a dog's ability to track specific scents among a sea of distractions. It was a test most dogs could handle. But Chance? He moved with purpose, his body language deliberate as he worked through the scent trails. Where others rushed, Chance took his time, methodically working his way through the field, ensuring that he followed only the right scent. He didn't just follow orders. He analyzed the situation, using his intelligence to guide him. Grace watched with bated breath as Chance made his way through the course. The other dogs sped through, eager to finish. But Chance? He was in control, focused, patient, and unyielding. He knew what mattered. When the results were called, Chance's name rang out as the winner of the scent detection trial. The crowd was stunned. A rescue dog had just beaten the best-trained dogs in the country at their own game. But the real challenge was yet to come. The next event was a protection scenario, the most demanding of them all. It involved multiple suspects, some acting aggressively, others passively surrendering. Dogs had to be able to discern the threat from the innocent, using their training to protect without escalating the situation. Grace's heart pounded in her chest as she and Chance entered the arena. Her eyes never left him as he moved into position, waiting for the next command. This was it, the moment that would either make or break them. The first suspect emerged, brandishing a weapon. He moved quickly, aggressively, and Chance responded immediately, positioning himself between Grace and the suspect, his body low and ready. But just as quickly, another suspect stepped forward, a woman, visibly terrified. She raised her hands, signaling that she wasn't a threat. Where others might have reacted aggressively to the sudden appearance of a second suspect, Chance did something extraordinary. He hesitated. For just a moment, he studied the woman, reading her body language. He understood her fear, and instead of charging forward, Chance stepped back, waiting for Grace's signal. Stay, Grace whispered, her voice steady. Chance obeyed, his eyes locked on the suspect with the weapon, his posture poised but non-aggressive. He had read the situation, and he had chosen the right course of action. The judges were stunned by his restraint. No other dog had shown that kind of control, that ability to assess the situation before reacting. It was a skill that went beyond training. It was instinct. Grace was trembling with pride as she guided Chance through the final portion of the test. It wasn't just a performance. It was a demonstration of everything she had believed about him. The things that made him different, the things that made him extraordinary. As the event drew to a close, Grace knew one thing for certain. They had proven themselves. It didn't matter what the critics said anymore. Chance had shown the world what he was made of, and more importantly, he had shown Grace that she wasn't wrong to believe in him. Later that evening, as Grace sat in the quiet of the training room with Chance, she reflected on everything they had accomplished. The hard work, the doubts, the setbacks. But none of that mattered now. What mattered was that they had done it together. They had faced the impossible and turned it into a victory. Chance had shown the world that being different was not a weakness. It was a strength. Well done, boy, Grace whispered, rubbing his ears. We did it. Chance rested his head in her lap, his eyes peaceful and content. He didn't need the applause. He didn't need the validation. He only needed Grace. And Grace, for the first time in a long while, realized that she had found exactly what she had been searching for. The sun had barely risen over Millbrook when a phone call came in. A massive fire had broken out in the industrial district. An explosion had trapped 3 workers inside a dangerously unstable building. The fire still raged, and the risk of further explosions was high. Grace and Chance were called in as a last resort. The building was too unstable for human rescue teams. But Chance's ability to navigate wreckage made him their best hope. Grace, I need you to understand the risk. Chief Thompson's voice crackled over the radio. We're sending you in because we don't have a choice, but we don't have much time. You've got 15 minutes. Grace nodded to herself as she geared up. We can do it, she whispered to Chance. His dark eyes met hers, full of trust. In that moment, she knew this was more than just a mission. It was the ultimate test of everything they had fought for. The industrial building loomed ahead, its skeletal frame creaking under the weight of the fire's heat. Smoke poured from every crack, and the air was thick with the acrid scent of burning metal and plastic. Grace's heart pounded as she led Chance toward the ruins, her flashlight cutting through the haze. They had only minutes. Find them, she commanded. Chance moved with calm determination, his powerful frame navigating the wreckage with precision. The smell of burning wood and gas was overpowering, but Chance's nose worked tirelessly, his instincts guiding him through the labyrinth of debris. They moved through a maze of collapsed beams and twisted metal, Chance's every step deliberate, his eyes scanning for danger. When they found the first worker trapped beneath a fallen beam, Grace knew they were running out of time. The structure groaned ominously above them, threatening to collapse at any moment. But Chance didn't hesitate. He pressed forward, his body brushing against Grace as if to remind her that he was there, that he wasn't going to let her fail. They found the second worker soon after, unconscious but alive. Grace's radio crackled again. We gotta move faster. Structural integrity is failing. The pressure was mounting, but Grace stayed focused. She glanced at Chance, his tail steady behind him, his movements as smooth as ever. He wasn't rattled. He was doing exactly what he was born to do. Then disaster struck. The building's foundation gave way with a violent groan. A massive beam crashed down, sending debris tumbling toward them. Grace and Chance had only seconds to react. In one fluid motion, Chance lunged forward, pushing Grace and the second worker out of harm's way. The beam crashed down where they had just stood, missing them by inches. Chance was trapped beneath the rubble, the beam pinning him down with unimaginable force. Grace screamed in desperation as she tried to free him, but the weight of the metal was too much. She couldn't do it alone. But then, just as quickly as it had fallen, the fire began to rage again, consuming the wreckage around them. Grace knew she had to make a decision. Leave Chance and save herself, or stay with him and risk it all. "Stay with me, boy," Grace whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm not leaving you." With all her strength, Grace tried to lift the beam, but it was impossible. She cried out for help, her voice hoarse with panic. Just then, the sound of sirens pierced the air. Help was on the way. But it would take time. Every second felt like an eternity. Chance's eyes locked with hers, calm, unbroken. It was as if he knew what she was thinking. His tail wagged weakly. Despite the pain, he was still there, still holding on. It was a miracle that they were rescued at all. When the rescue team finally arrived, Grace had to be pulled away from the debris, her hands bloodied from the struggle to free Chance. They found him alive, barely breathing, but alive. The next few hours were a blur of frantic medical care, emergency surgeries, and waiting. At the hospital, Dr. Morrison's grim face told Grace everything she needed to know. "The injuries are severe, Grace," she said softly. "There's damage to his spine. He might never walk again." The words hit her like a punch to the gut. How could this happen? After everything they had been through, after everything Chance had done? But as she sat by his side, his eyes still filled with trust, she made a vow. "Don't give up, Chance," she whispered, her voice raw with emotion. "You've given me everything. I'm going to fight for you now, just like you fought for me." Days passed. It was touch and go. The doctors worked tirelessly to save him, but it was a slow process. Grace didn't leave his side. She stayed in the hospital room, speaking to him, rubbing his fur, doing everything she could to comfort him. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but she also knew that if there was one thing Chance had taught her, it was that nothing was impossible if you were willing to fight for it. And fight they did. Weeks later, when Chance finally opened his eyes, Grace was there. His tail wagged weakly, and his body trembled from the effort, but he was alive. Grace held his head in her lap, tears streaming down her face. "We're not done yet," she whispered. "We're going to make it through this together. I promise you." Sometimes, the greatest battles are the ones we fight alongside the ones who refuse to give up on us. Grace's journey with Chance proves that healing isn't just about physical recovery. It's about never giving up, no matter how impossible the odds. Chance showed Grace that love, trust, and determination can turn even the most painful experiences into victories. Together, they demonstrated that second chances are not just for the broken. They're for those brave enough to believe in them. What lessons have you learned from your own experiences of overcoming challenges? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to HeartForce for more stories about the strength and resilience of dogs.